July the 5th, 2026. Norway 2, Brazil 1. Let that sink in for a second. Norway gone in the round of 16. And here is what makes this even more extraordinary. This was not just any Norway, this was a golden generation. Erling Haaland, the most lethal striker on the planet, the man who scores goals the way other people breathe. Martin Ødegaard, one of the most technically gifted midfielders of his generation, the architect, the conductor, a Norway built to hurt you. But here is the thing that will haunt Brazilian football forever. This was not a surprise, because Norway is the only national team in the history of football that has never lost to Brazil. Let that sentence land. The only one. Ever. 1986. A draw. 1997. Norway 4. Brazil 2. 1998. World Cup. Norway wins. 2006. Another draw. 4 meetings. 0 Brazilian victories. Brazil. The 5-time world champions. The nation that invented beautiful football. The country that gave the world Pelé. Ronaldo. Ronaldinho. Has never beaten Norway. Not once. In official competition. In friendlies. In World Cups. Never. And tonight, in the round of 16 of the 2026 World Cup, Norway reminded Brazil of that fact one more time. This is the story of how the greatest football nation in history lost itself. Between 1958 and 2002, Brazil won the World Cup 5 times. 5. 1958. Pelé was 17 years old. 17, and he was already the best player on the planet. 1970. The greatest team ever assembled. Pelé, Jairzinho, Tostão, Rivellino. A team so beautiful that even their opponents applauded them. 1994. Romario and Bebeto, the most lethal strike partnership in World Cup history. 2002. Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo. 3 players who would have been starters in any team on the planet. And on the bench, a young Kaká. Just an unused substitute. Not good enough yet to start for Brazil. That is how deep the talent was. That Brazil was not a football team. That Brazil was a religion. And then, nothing. 2006. Gone. 2010. Gone. 2014. 7-1. At home. 2018. Gone. 2022. Gone. 2026. Norway. Again. 24 years. 0 titles. And tonight, the question every Brazilian fan has been asking in silence for years finally became impossible to ignore. What happened to Brazil? 3 things before we go any further. 1. The night that broke Brazilian football forever. 2. The man Brazil put everything on, and what it cost them. 3. The uncomfortable question nobody wants to answer about this generation. Stay with me, because this story goes far beyond football. Now, the weight. Imagine growing up in Brazil. You are 5 years old. You kick a ball for the first time, and before you even know the rules of the game, you already know one thing. Brazil wins the World Cup. That is what Brazil does. It is not an aspiration. It is not a goal. It is an expectation, built into the culture, written into the national identity. 5 stars on the shirt. The most in the history of the World Cup. And every single player who puts on that yellow jersey carries all 5 of them. Not as a source of pride, as a weight, because in Brazil, winning the World Cup is not considered an achievement. It is considered an obligation. And when you play to avoid failure instead of playing to win, you lose. Every single time. Tonight, they lost. Again. July 8th, 2014, Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Semi-final of the World Cup. At home, Brazil versus Germany. By halftime, the score was 5-0. 5-0. At home. In a World Cup semi-final. The Brazilian players were not just losing, They were absent, confused, paralyzed. The stadium was silent. Not the silence of concentration, the silence of a nation watching its identity collapse in real time. Final score, 7-1. 7 goals. Against Brazil. In Brazil. At the World Cup. The Brazilian commentator who called the match simply stopped speaking at some point. There were no words. There was nothing left to say. Fans in the streets crying, not like fans who lost a game, like people who lost something much more important. And one player was missing that night. He had been injured a few days before. A back injury. He could not play. His name was Neymar. And right there, you can see the entire problem with Brazilian football in one image. A country of 200 million people, a nation with more registered football players than any other country on earth, a culture where football is not a sport but a language. And yet, without one man, they fell apart. That is not a coincidence. That is a structural problem. Because since 2010, Brazil built everything around Neymar. When Neymar plays well, Brazil wins. When Neymar is injured or out of form, Brazil implodes. 3 consecutive World Cups with Neymar either injured, diminished, or a shadow of himself at the critical moments. And in 2026, the coach made the controversial decision to select Neymar despite serious doubts about his physical condition. Not because Neymar was ready, but because without Neymar, nobody knew who Brazil was anymore. That decision said everything. It said that after 24 years, Brazil still has not found an answer to the question that the 7-1 asked. Who are you without your best player? For Germany, the answer was, we are still Germany. For France, the answer was, we are still France. For Brazil, the question remains unanswered. And tonight in the round of 16, Norway gave them another chance to answer it. They couldn't. Because here is the uncomfortable truth about Neymar and Brazil. The greatest Brazilian player of his generation never won a World Cup. Not because he lacked the talent, but because Brazil needed him to be more than a footballer. They needed him to be a solution to a problem that no single player can ever solve alone. That is too much for any human being. Even him. There was a time when you could recognize Brazilian football from 30 meters away. Not from the yellow jersey. From the way they moved, the creativity, the joy, the improvisation, the complete absence of fear. Pelé inventing moves nobody had ever seen. Ronaldinho smiling while destroying defenders. Adriano shooting from 30 meters as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The Jogo Bonito. The beautiful game. It was not a style. It was an identity. And it is gone. Not overnight. Slowly. Quietly. Irreversibly. The best young Brazilian players leave for Europe at 16, 17 years old. They join Spanish academies. English academies. French academies. They learn to press. To track back. To follow instructions. To fit into a system. All the things that make you a good European-style footballer. And all the things that slowly erase what made Brazilian football Brazilian. They come back for the World Cup wearing the yellow shirt, but somewhere between São Paulo and Madrid, they lost something. They are no longer truly Brazilian, not yet truly European. They are between 2 worlds. And in that space between 2 worlds, there is no magic. Now, the question. Is this the weakest Brazilian team ever sent to a World Cup? Look at 2002. Ronaldo. Ronaldinho. Rivaldo. Kaká. 4 players who could have transformed any team on the planet. 4 footballing geniuses. Now look at 2026. Who is the player on this team who makes you stand up from your sofa? Who is capable of inventing something nobody has ever seen in the last 10 minutes of a World Cup knockout game? The silence that answers that question is the most honest thing Brazilian football has produced in years. The individual talent has not disappeared. It has diluted. A generation between 2 worlds. And tonight, Norway drowned it. But talent alone does not explain this, because behind the players, there is an organization. And that organization has been failing Brazilian football for 20 years. 4 coaches in 4 years. Think about that. 4 coaches in 4 years, while Spain won the World Cup with the same core group of players developed over a decade, while Germany built their 2014 team over 8 years of patient work. Brazil changed coaches 4 times. 96 different players called up over the same period. 96. Not because there was exceptional depth, because there was no plan, no clear identity, no long-term vision, no courage to build something and stick with it. The federation making marketing decisions disguised as sporting decisions, selecting players because of what they sell commercially, not because of what they contribute tactically. And the result is standing in front of us tonight. Eliminated by Norway. In the round of 16. And then there is the pattern that nobody in Brazil wants to look at directly. 2006. France. 2010. Netherlands. 2014. Germany. 2018. Belgium. 2022. Croatia. 2026. Norway. 6 consecutive eliminations by European nations. This is not bad luck. This is a systematic problem. Europe learned how to beat Brazil. With organization. With physicality. With tactical discipline. With a collective that is stronger than any individual. Everything that Brazilian football has been unable or unwilling to develop, because developing those things would require admitting something very difficult, that the old way no longer works, that 5 stars on a shirt does not guarantee anything, that the world changed and Brazil did not change with it. That is the hardest thing any person, any team, any nation can ever do. Look in the mirror and say, what made us great is no longer enough. So, what does all of this mean? It means that Brazil did not lose to Norway tonight. Brazil lost to itself, to the weight of 5 stars that became a prison, to a system that chose one man over a team, to an identity so powerful that it became impossible to evolve, to an organization that confused nostalgia with strategy. And here is what makes this story bigger than football. Because Brazil's problem is not unique to football. It is the problem of every person, every company, every institution that has been defined by past success. When your greatest achievement becomes your identity, it stops being your strength. It becomes your limit. The 5 stars on Brazil's shirt are magnificent, and they are also the heaviest thing any footballer has ever been asked to carry. Because in Brazil, the question was never, can we win? The question was always, how dare we not? And that single shift, from ambition to obligation, changes everything. It changes how you play. It changes how you think. It changes how you respond when a Norwegian defender intercepts the ball in the 67th minute and Haaland runs clean through. You do not respond like a team with nothing to lose. You respond like a team carrying the weight of 24 years of unspoken failure. And you collapse. So the next time someone tells you that past success guarantees future results, the next time someone hands you a legacy and tells you that is enough, the next time you feel the weight of what you used to be pressing down on what you are trying to become, remember Brazil. Remember what happens when the weight of who you were stops you from becoming who you need to be. 5 stars. 24 years. Norway. There is no greater cautionary tale in the history of sport. If this video spoke to you, subscribe. Every week we tell the stories behind football that nobody else talks about. There is always more to this story. There is.